They take you for fools. While you admire art in museums, the corpse of a civilization far more advanced than ours is being hidden right under your nose. They lie to you about natural progress, but we are living on the ruins of a world that was forcibly unplugged. You are looking at the fragments of a planetary operating system and believing they are merely toys. It is time to expose the truth that historians are trying to bury in the archives. Look at the catalogues of the Hermitage or the British Museum. In the micromechanics section, there is a shocking anomaly. Up until the mid-19th century, there was an explosion of technology and unthinkable precision. But in the 1870s, production cut off instantly and simultaneously from London to Beijing. Masters forgot how to create masterpieces as if on command. In 1850, China had thousands of mechanisms. Europe had hundreds of workshops. By 1900, absolute zero. An entire industry evaporated in a single generation. Technology doesn't die like that. It is murdered. This isn't evolution. It's a total dismantling of infrastructure. Why did thousands of factories stop at once? The answer lies in the dates on old clocks. This conspiracy is larger than you think. Let's move to the numbers that historians are afraid to speak aloud. The technological execution. Look at the dates. This isn't statistics, it's an obituary. In the 1870s, a technological execution took place, which official science shamefully hides behind boring terminology. The entire world, at the push of a button, simultaneously lost the ability to create masterpieces of micromechanics. This wasn't a market downturn, it was the execution of an industry. An analysis of auction archives from Christie's and Sotheby's reveals a terrifying picture. Before 1870, there was a flood of complex lots. After, a collapse. This wasn't a gradual fading where small shops closed while giants fought for the market. This was a total synchronous stop. In the 1850s, mechanics were at their peak. Kulibin in Russia, Jacques Droz in Switzerland, and thousands of workshops from London to Istanbul were stamping out parts with micron precision. By the 1880s, dead silence. The machines cooled, the orders vanished, and the continuity of generations was cut at the root. Technology doesn't vanish without a trace in 10 years due to a change in fashion. Radio didn't kill newspapers, smartphones didn't destroy PCs. True progress integrates the old into the new. But here we see the surgical removal of technology from the body of civilization. Why would someone need to destroy a profitable global industry? If it wasn't competition, then these mechanisms performed a function that became dangerous for the new masters of the world. And the main piece of evidence is the fake alibi historians planted on us. Are you ready to hear why the tale of the gramophone is a cheap fake for the masses? The gramophone alibi. We were fed the story of the gramophone like a bone to a hungry dog. The official version states musical boxes became unnecessary because sound recording emerged. This is a blatant lie intended for those who don't know how to use a calendar. You were given a fake alibi to hide the fact of technological murder. Let's use logic and a calculator. Edison presented the phonograph in 1877, and mass production of gramophones began even later. But the production of complex mechanics froze in the early 1870s. The market died 5 to 7 years before its competitor even appeared. That doesn't happen. A market doesn't commit suicide in anticipation of future inventions. Furthermore, what does a gramophone have to do with it when not only music boxes, but also clocks, drawing automata, mechanical theaters, and computing blocks disappeared from museums? A gramophone cannot draw portraits or calculate the phases of the moon. They are trying to explain the disappearance of computers by the invention of the radio. It's absurd. Clearly, micromechanics were purged intentionally, and the gramophone was framed after the fact, so we wouldn't ask questions about the empty shelves in history. The global standard, GOST of the 18th century. An English screw fits perfectly into a Russian gear in the 18th century, without the internet, aviation, or telephones. How is this possible in a world where, according to historians, peasants were tilling the earth with wooden plows? You've been deceived. Globalization didn't start in the 20th century, it was destroyed in the 19th. Take a clock from the Winter Palace collection in St. Petersburg and a similar mechanism from Beijing or London. Disassemble them, and you will find something terrifying. The axle diameters, thread pitches, gear modules, and tolerances are absolutely identical. This is a modern industrial standard. But officially, these were introduced only a century and a half later. For a master in London and a master in St. Petersburg to make interchangeable parts, they needed reference measuring tools, a unified education system, and a central control body. You cannot agree verbally across an ocean on a precision of 0.05 millimeters. It is impossible without a unified administrative center dictating the rules of the game across the entire planet. Machines in different parts of the world worked from the same blueprints, as if they belonged to a single mega corporation. Who controlled every lathe tool from Geneva to Canton, and where did all the archives with these blueprints go after 1870? If production was so mass-produced and unified, it means these devices weren't art, but standard-issue equipment. The planetary interface. Do you seriously believe that 6,000 parts were assembled over years just to surprise guests in a parlor? That's like using a supercomputer to play Snake. We are forced to see cute toys in automata, so we don't notice the servers and control terminals that once ruled reality. Look at the Jacquet Draw's writer. This isn't a doll, it's a programmable input-output device. The 6,000 steel and brass parts inside are a mechanical processor. Replaceable cams, memory disks, allow it to output any text. This is the complexity level of a modern printer, realized in metal. But why such redundancy? Official history is silent on the fact that these devices were placed strictly at nodes of power. Palaces, town halls, temples. The writers ensured perfect copying of documents without human error, while mechanical musicians were frequency modulators. A doll striking the actual keys of a harpsichord with millisecond precision generated acoustic codes, infrasonic signals for crowd synchronization or controlling hidden systems in buildings. This was the interface of a planetary operating system. The recursive lathe. To create a miracle clock, you need a precision-class lathe, but they didn't create it, they took it ready-made. The official history of technology is a ridiculous attempt to explain how people with hammers and files suddenly started cutting metal with micron precision. You are forced to believe in magic to hide the fact of inheritance. Look at the blueprints of 18th century lathes. They are engineering perfection. Dividing heads, screw feeds, worm gears. Here lies a technological dead end. Recursion. To manufacture a precision screw for a lathe, you already need a lathe with that same screw. In the history of progress, there is no period of crooked lathes. They appear in the archives already perfect. We don't see an evolution from coarse to fine. Lathes from 1750 are comparable in processing precision to industrial equipment from the late 19th century. Metal doesn't rot, yet where is the scrap heap of history containing the first clumsy attempts? It doesn't exist. Technologies didn't develop over centuries, they were handed down to us as a legacy from a previous, more powerful system. In the 19th century, we were merely wearing out old tools until they reached their limit or were confiscated. The myth of the self-taught genius. The brilliant self-taught man from a rural village is the most shameful and ridiculous lie in your textbooks. Stop believing it. We are forced to worship mythical loners so we don't notice the existence of massive state departments and ghost factories that stamped out micromechanics on an industrial scale. Deconstructing biographies reveals the absurdity. Ivan Kulibin, allegedly with no formal education, restored the complex English peacock clock, which arrived in crates as a pile of scrap. Without blueprints, without knowledge of the British measurement system or inch thread standards, he, on his knee, machined the missing parts, which fit perfectly. This is impossible. One man cannot simultaneously be a materials scientist, a mathematician, an astronomer, and a precision turner. Kulibin isn't a man with a file, he is a brand for the Imperial Engineering Department. Jacquet Draw's isn't a lone watchmaker, but a production center in Switzerland. Biographies of these naturals were written after the fact to hide the global network of workshops and educational institutions. Mass production was turned into legends of divine gifts, so you wouldn't ask, where are the diplomas of these people and where are the institutes that trained them? Why did all these geniuses vanish along with the destruction of the old system? Why is it that today, with all our CNC machines and lasers, not a single modern craftsman can replicate 18th century mechanics without hints? The answer is simple. In the 1850s, a global purge began, and the geniuses were ordered to fall silent. Are you ready to see how the world was sanitized under the roar of cannons? The wars of the mid-19th century were not about territories or the ambitions of monarchs. They were a massive smokescreen behind which professional marauders dismantled the global technological network. While soldiers died for faith and fatherland, the planet's operating system was being erased from reality, wiping out the last witnesses and documentation. Look closely at the madness of the 1850s and 60s. The Crimean War in Europe, the bloody Taiping Rebellion in China, the Sepoy Mutiny in India, the American Civil War. Chaos erupted simultaneously across 4 continents. This was not a series of coincidences, but a coordinated operation to sever the logistical links of the old world. Under the thunder of cannonades, archives were destroyed, blueprints burned, and those very workshops of geniuses were closed. It was during this period that Great Tartaria finally vanished from the maps, and with it, the unified control network. The new masters didn't need autonomous mechanical processors and independent communication systems. They needed oil, coal, and slaves dependent on centralized energy supplies. War became the perfect tool to write off the disappearance of an entire civilization as combat losses. Why destroy something beneficial? Because the old network was tied to an infrastructure that could not be hijacked. It could only be destroyed or buried. Have you ever wondered why old cities around the world look as if they were buried in mud? It's time to descend into the basements. The buried infrastructure. You are walking on the heads of the dead. Your cities are merely stage sets erected on the rooftops of a civilization whose primary mechanisms are still buried under 3 meters of soil. The buried first floors across the planet are not a cultural layer, but a gargantuan graveyard of infrastructure that was hastily decommissioned. Look at the buildings in the centers of old capitals, windows sinking into the ground, bricked-up vaults, underground tunnels connecting entire blocks. The official version of dirt accumulation from horse hooves is nonsense for the feeble-minded. The basements of old town halls and palaces were not originally warehouses, they were machine rooms. The micromechanics on the surface, clocks, automata, were merely the interface, the display powered by massive installations hidden below. A unified communication network ran underground, connecting control nodes bypassing any borders. When the system was dismantled in the 19th century, its lower levels were simply poured over with concrete or filled with soil, turning technological hubs into basements. We see only the tip of the iceberg, while the heart of the system still rots beneath our feet. What devices hummed underground, fueling clocks with the energy we now call magic or ether? This energy was free and accessible to all, but it was replaced by frequency terror. Are you ready to learn how musical boxes and organs actually subjugated your will? Acoustic psychotronics. The organs in cathedrals and mechanical musicians never played Bach for your aesthetic pleasure. They were combat acoustic arrays transmitting vibrations that kept the population in check. You weren't being entertained, you were being trained at a cellular level, using mechanics as the ultimate tool of psychotronic control. Sound is not just music, it is physical impact. The micromechanics of the 18th century allowed for the extraction of frequencies with a mathematical precision unreachable by a human performer. Jacques Droz's mechanical musicians and massive tower organs worked in a single rhythm, creating a planetary resonance network. Certain frequency combinations, infrasound and ultrasound, can trigger awe, panic, or absolute obedience in a crowd. Tower clocks didn't just tell time. They were tuning forks, synchronizing the biological rhythms of people with the rhythms of the system. It was an acoustic prison without walls. When the old network was shut down, these transmitters were declared art objects, so you would never guess that your delight at old music is merely an echo of genetic fear before the power of frequency control. Did the network fall silent because the old master of frequencies changed, or because the slaves began to wake up and fall out of resonance? Today, cell towers have replaced mechanics. but the principle remains the same. We are merely savages with iPhones playing with the shards of a great mechanical computer. The civilization of parasites. We take pride in our slim smartphones and high-speed internet, but in reality, we are just frightened children playing with the shards of a broken mirror. Our civilization is entirely dependent on power outlets and cloud servers, whereas the destroyed system of the past mastered the very physics of space, requiring no wires. Compare our fragile digital world with their eternal metal. Any electromagnetic pulse will turn your gadgets into pieces of dead plastic, but the mechanical processes of Tartaria could work for centuries without wear or hacker attacks. We consider ourselves the pinnacle of evolution, but we have lost the foundation. We no longer know how to create what our ancestors produced en masse. We replace deep knowledge of matter with superficial consumption. Modern IT giants are but pale shadows of the departments that managed the planetary network before 1870. We were conditioned for a disposable world, so we could never accumulate power equal to that which was bricked up in the basements of the past. We are a parasite civilization living on the body of a great mechanical organism whose functions we cannot even comprehend. Who will flip the switch in our century when the current operating system becomes inconvenient for the new curators? And what fairy tale will be written about us by those who, in 100 years, will be clearing away the trash of microchips? The finale is ahead, and it will leave no room for illusions. The museum graveyard. A museum is not a temple of culture, it is a cemetery. A tour guide is not a teacher, but a gravedigger whose task is to ensure you don't notice the truth among the polished glass cases. Your memory has been erased, your textbooks rewritten, and your future lies in the hands of those who once already turned off the lights for an entire civilization. The facts are on the table, and they scream of a crime. The synchronous death of production in the 1870s, the impossible standardization of parts across the planet, the bricked-up floors of cities, and the legends of self-taught geniuses designed to hide the industrial might of the past. This is not a conspiracy theory, it is stubborn mechanics that cannot be faked. We are living in the era of the Great Rollback. We were left with only the scraps of technology, turning the world's control operators into curiosities for idle viewing. Every time you hear the official explanation of the natural decline of craft, know this: the system that destroyed its creators is laughing in your face. We are the heirs of the Great Severance, and everything that surrounds us is but a temporary superstructure over a foundation we are afraid to explore.